The long-awaited return of question time after nearly 4 months, and the government is still on cloud 9, basking in its near-total domination of the 48th Parliament, mocking a diminished opposition.
The no election held it up for 3 years.
Order. Prime Minister will refer to the coalition as the coalition. Oh, collective term.
Behind the Prime Minister, a backbench overflowing with new talent. Labor gifting its opening Dorothy Dixes to a long line of giant killers, including the women who ousted Peter Dutton and Adam Bant.
Can I thank the magnificent member for Melbourne for her question?
And Renee Coffey, who sunk Greens firebrand Max Chandler Mather.
To the new member for Griffith, can I say congratulations on your election?
Though Labor's glee at beating future Liberal Party leadership hopeful Keith Woolahan would have stung the most.
Mr Speaker, it's a source of considerable pride that we say today that we have a Labor member for Menzies, Mr Speaker.
The government's celebrations have thwarted Susan Lee's determination to land a blow against Labor over its election promises. The most challenging of those, free bulk billing and 1.2 million new homes. Instead, Lee's debut opposite the dispatch box was overshadowed by the Nationals, once again airing their deep divisions over net zero.
If you go around this crazy idea that you're going to have net zero, you might as well turn off the lights and live in a cave. It's not going to work.
The former Nationals leader plans to introduce a private members bill next week that would repeal nearly 20 years of climate and green energy policy. A move that simultaneously undermines Nationals leader David Littleproud, with Joyce swinging his support behind former rival Michael McCormack.
Barnaby Joyce, I noticed, said that he'd back you for leader if things were to get a little unsteady in the party.
I'm not running for leader anytime soon. What I want to see.
You jumped in quick. I didn't even get a chance to ask you the question.
I'll let you ask the question then, Mark.
Well, do you want the job again one day?
Oh, look, but you're never going to rule your name through. You're never going to put a pen through your name for the leadership in the future. I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, who would know?
The leadership taunts are not new, but they appear to be prompting Littleproud to rethink his ironclad support for net zero, a pledge introduced by Scott Morrison and kept on the books by Peter Dutton.
I think net zero, unfortunately, has become something about trying to achieve the impossible rather than actually doing what's sensible.
The Nationals' infighting is an unwelcome reminder of just how deep those coalition divisions run. At a time when Susan Lee and her climate spokesman Dan Tehan are struggling to play down the rifts.
Well, I know these three blokes and they're pretty good at speaking up for themselves. So on these matters, I'll let them do that. Nobody's getting under my skin, James. Matters for the National Party are for the National Party and within their party room, which I don't enter and participate in.
When there is two steers fighting in a neighbour's paddock, I'll let them do their fighting and do what needs to be done.
For some Liberals, however, the thought of dumping their own climate policy is unthinkable.
Over and over again now, the electorate has told us that they want to see a net zero energy future. They want to see emissions come down. That's what successive elections have told us. Now, my personal opinion is that this is profoundly important for not just the electorate, but also for our country.
Independent Senator David Pocock says the country has moved beyond another climate row.
I think the time for arguing about whether or not this is something we should pay attention to is over. Now it is, how fast can we go and what will it mean for future generations? What sort of world are we going to hand them?
For the government, the coalition's predicament becoming a source of mirth.
The member for Riverina said on the Kieran Gilbert show, we're virile and we're out there, he said. The member for New England and the member for Riverina. Now, this is not his Tinder profile. This is his dream ticket. This is his dream ticket. He's not looking to swipe right. He's looking to swipe out. The member for Maranoa, Mr Speaker, is what he's trying to do.
While the joke's on the opposition in the lower house, in the upper house, it was others who were making a scene.
I acknowledge the Ngunnawal and Ngambri peoples.
One Nation senators refused to apologise after turning their backs during the Welcome to Country, while the Greens deputy leader faced reprimand for waving a pro-Palestinian poster in the Senate yesterday.
It may well be her move is designed to show her base, Greens base, that she's more hardline than the current leader.
You are more focused on cracking down on black and brown women in this parliament.
Theatrics aside, in the Senate, Labor appears to have a simpler operating environment than it did in the first term. Rather than the three-dimensional chess of wrangling a large crossbench, it can pick and choose between a weakened coalition or the Greens, who also went backwards at the election.
The focus is now on them. They've got a huge majority in the House. They've got a pathway in the Senate to deal with all of those things. Will they have the courage to actually stare down vested interests and put Australians first? I think that's the big question.
Central to the stirring behaviour in the Nationals today, the former leader of the Nationals and former Deputy Prime Minister Barnaby Joyce joins me now. Barnaby Joyce, welcome.
Sarah, thanks for having me.
You're a former leader of the National Party, a former Deputy PM. These are facts. Has your political career now just devolved into you being an agent of chaos?
No, of course not. I mean, this is part of your political career, is to make sure that you advocate for the powerless against the powerful. And what I'm seeing is the powerless in regional areas who are just beside themselves. This idea that basically security guards come onto their place, backed up by the police, fines if you go and try and stop them in the thousands of dollars, $12,000, planes observing what you do, helicopters observing what you do, pensioners, the very vulnerable, basically being put into destitution by power prices they can't afford.
OK, hold on. I know you want to talk about transmission lines and solar panels.
But that is not an agent of chaos. That is actually standing up.
I know you want to talk about this, but let's talk about what's been going on inside the coalition today, particularly inside the Nationals. I want to clear up the situation first of all. Is David Littleproud the best person to lead the National Party?
There's absolutely no. This is not about David. It is not about me.
That's a question.
These conversations spear off into something that's got nothing to do with net zero.
You're the one that's been talking today. You gave an interview. You're talking about the leadership. So I want to clear that up for our viewers.
Because I get asked. It's not about it. David's safe. It's got nothing to do with David. This is about net zero. This is about trying to help people in regional Australia, help pensioners, and also help our nation, which is doing something really dangerous to itself. And we are making ourselves so vulnerable. And for no point, it's going to have what we are doing has no effect on the climate whatsoever.
But are these the first moves of the leadership move against?
No, they're not.
David
This is about the fact that we are in this perverse idea that on a sort of a position of Australia, that even though China's not doing it, India's not doing it, Indonesia's not doing it, the United States of America's not doing it, England won't do it if it changes government, New Zealand's not doing it, that solo, we're going to change the temperature.
Let's not snow the audience with a discussion about net zero. There's 123 countries in the world signed up to it.
The minority of the people and the minority of the GDP of the world. The majority are not part of it.
Now, what you can't escape is what you're doing in alliance with Michael McCormack. It does represent a challenge to the leader. Are you saying that David Littleproud is out of touch?
No, this is about
the party.
This is about we've got the election out of the way, so now we have the capacity to deal with this issue, which is of primary importance. You have people in halls basically crying because they are not being politically heard, and they see this place as a sort of a fool's castle that's completely removed from the realities of their life in regional Australia and the realities of what we're doing to our nation. We're deindustrialising Australia while the Chinese are breathing down our neck. This is insane.
Let me ask you a different question. Why do you need a private member's bill, which you know has zero chance of getting up, on abolishing net zero when the Nationals leader has asked Matt Canavan to do a review? Is it just to foment chaos?
No, of course not. It's a case of a promise you've made to the regional people that you were going to immediately, when you came down here, start an effective process of doing. And so I'm doing what I promised.
The question was, your leader after the party tasked your colleague, Senator Matt Canavan, with doing a review of the National Party's net zero policy. And you're putting forward a private member's bill, which you know has zero chance of progressing.
Well, so what would the review do? You can still have the review. Sarah, there's no divine law that says you can't have a review and move a private member's bill, and the private member's bill will be debated. I believe that Tony Burke's going to let it have a debate, and so we have the capacity to do what this building is supposed to do and clearly ventilate an issue that is of primary importance. And just the fact that you've got me on your show and everywhere else shows that it is of national importance. They do want it debated.
I think a lot of the people who've been talking to you today, and it's part of the reason why we invited you on, is because you are clearly making moves, destabilising the leadership of David McCormack.
That's verbling.
Sorry, David Littleproud.
That's verbling, because it's not, right? it's quite clear that what I'm doing is read my Facebook, you can read everything. It's about dealing with net zero. It's about dealing with people dealing with transmission lines, solar, swindle factories, capacity investments,
let's just
secret agreements in this place where we don't tell the public exactly what we're paying these billionaires.
All right, just come back. Let me come back to this. One of the reasons that you've attracted attention today is for some comments that you gave to The Australian, including that David Littleprow's decision to dump McCormack and yourself, calling it generational change, was, to use your word, terminal. That sounds like someone who's got a problem with it.
No, see, that once you're spearing back off into the leadership issue, and I'm talking about net zero.
It's the language that you use, Barnaby
and that's sort of
Joyce.
making a salacious guise to sort of say, cover up the net zero debate, let's all talk about something else. It's about net zero. It's about looking after this nation. It's about looking after regional people.
If that's the case, why did you use that word today when asked the question?
It was asked of me, what does generational change mean? I said, well, obviously it means that people believe that a new generation's there. But that is not what this is about.
But it's the language that you used about your leader.
Go with this debate where
a debate. If I may, Barnaby Joyce.
Net zero forever.
A debate. It's nothing to do.
Hail to the billionaires.
Would you just hold on a second? It's got nothing to do with the ABC. I'm quoting
language. About leadership and not about net zero.
I'm quoting language that you used today. Let me put the question to you in a different way. Let me put the question to you in a different way.
Soap opera rather than the issue.
What happens to the coalition if, after the review done by the National Party decides that it wants to get rid of net zero, and the Liberals review say they want to keep it? What happens to the coalition at that point?
In recent times, we've had apparently 60% of people believed in the voice, then they didn't. And in the past, we had people believing the ETS.
This is a question about what happens to the coalition.
The point of this building is you put forward a cogent and fervent argument that is premised on good, that takes your nation to a better place. That is what I am doing. It is not about leadership. I have no intentions of challenging for leadership. It is not about that at all. It is about what is best for this nation.
So just coming back, if I may, you've already said that. Let me just come back to this.
Because that's what this issue is about.
I just want to go back to the question that I just asked. What happens to the coalition, which we saw in a great deal of turmoil straight after the election, splitting apart, getting back together again? What happens to the coalition if, after the Liberals' review, they want to keep net zero, after the Nationals' review, you want to get rid of it? What happens to the coalition?
Well, I just want to go back to the answer I just given.
I'd rather you answered that question, Barnaby Joyce.
The answer I just given is, I'm happy to come in here and talk again about that.
But what happens to the coalition in that case?
I don't know. Give me a crystal ball. I don't know.
You understand the internal dynamics between the Nationals and your Liberal
colleagues. Once more, we're spearing off away from what matters to people in regional Australia, of what matters about getting manufacturing back into Australia, of what matters about having a strong industrial base so you can actually defend this nation. That's what actually matters. So a pensioner watching this now, she wants to know how she can afford a power bill. That's what she wants to hear. She doesn't give a toss about who's who in the wooden canoe in regards.
I just want to go back to Jane. I just want to go to Jane Hume, who featured in Jacob's package. You said terrible when her name came up. Lovely person, but terrible.
What she said was terrible, not her.
Fine. Yes, you said she was a lovely person, but she has said over and over and over again, the electorate has told us they want a net zero future.
Well, they didn't vote for us at the last election, did they?
And your Liberal colleagues will say that abandoning net zero will kill off their chances of winning metropolitan seats. Do you not care about the consequences of what you're doing to your Liberal coalition colleagues?
We went to 2 elections, Sarah, with a net zero policy, and we just went bad and terribly. So, no, I don't countenance that argument, because if that was the case, they would have all come flocking back to us, wouldn't they?
So this is the solution.
Well, it's a solution to the lady who can't afford a power, to the farmer who's been decimated and with a massive intrusion, almost a socialist intrusion, with areas with helicopters and planes and security guards going into places, with the people who in small businesses say, I just can't afford to do this anymore. It's idiotic. And for the fact that this will have no effect on the climate whatsoever. What is the point of that folly?
Barnaby Joyce, not accepting your point about folly, but moving on. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Absolute pleasure, Sarah.
I just want to change the tone very slightly here, because we are used to politicians appearing to be thick-skinned. The execution of power demands it, and I should say this is not a reflection on Barnaby Joyce. I just wanted to change the tone. Because tonight we'll see a slightly different side of Education Minister Jason Clare, who today introduced the government's childcare legislation and who is tasked with fixing the crisis in childcare that's left some of our youngest children vulnerable. He joined me earlier. Jason Clare, welcome.
Thank you.
So new legislation today, it gives you the power to cut off subsidies to childcare centres using the big stick. What is the threshold for taking that decision?
Well, it depends on the seriousness of what's happening in a centre. If we're concerned that there's an imminent threat to the safety of children in a centre, that centre can be shut down today.
So that already exists?
That already exists, and state regulators can and do that. But if we've got centres that are not meeting that standard, that quality and safety standard, there'll be the capacity, because of this legislation, for the Secretary of my department to issue a show cause notice to a centre to explain why they are not meeting that standard. Otherwise, the funding will be cut off within 28 days. But there's also the flexibility in the legislation to set conditions. So the Secretary could also say, you must do a number of things in order to maintain your funding. That flexibility is important here to make sure that we target the right centres. And I've got to tell you, there's a bit of work going on right now before the legislation's passed between my department and state regulators to make sure that we've got a list of the centres that we can and will target with this legislation.
So that's the question. How do you know which of Australia's 15,000 centres to target? So
well, they
tell
know.
me about that work.
State regulators know this because they rate centres.
Yes, but do they? Because the numbers on the frequency of testing, some of them haven't been, I think the average is every 4 years. Some centres haven't been tested for 10 years. So what information are they relying on?
Well, they know through the centres that they've rated that there's about 4% of centres that aren't meeting that minimum safety standard. And that can be everything from an exit sign through to lack of supervision. They also know the centres where they've set conditions for them themselves and they've told them you've got a couple of months to meet the grade, meet the standard, and then they come back a couple of months later and they haven't. They're the sort of centres that the states are telling us they want to use this legislation to pull the funding from.
I suppose the question is this plan built on shaky foundations, given that the way the system works, the way the accreditation is done, the way the testing is done, there are such huge gaps in it. Yes, there may be centres that have been identified by the states and territories.
Yeah.
But what about all those centres, some of them that haven't been visited for 10 years?
Yeah.
What about those centres
Yeah.
that have waivers? Where do they fit in?
Well, this is where states need to step up. You know, the Commonwealth needs to step up. All centres need to step up here if we're going to make sure that this legislation does what we want it to do. But, you know, Sarah, I'm also not here to say that this is a silver bullet, that this is going to guarantee that every child's safe just because of this legislation. You know, I spent a good part of today dealing with some mothers of children who were sexually assaulted and abused in centres that were already at that standard. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't be using the power that the Commonwealth has with all the funding we provide to centres to say to centres, if you're not at that standard, we're going to remove the funding. At its core, this is not about cutting off funding to centres and shutting centres down. If it works the way it should work, it'll send a message to the people who run these centres that you've got to get to that standard or the money's going to be turned off.
So what do? You say you want the states to do more, but what do you do about the fact that there clearly aren't enough regulators available in the states and territories to look at all of those 15,000 centres? There are too many with very long gaps, never tested, or the long gaps that I was talking about. So you know there aren't enough regulators in the states to visit those centres. So what do you do about that?
There's two things. The regulators already tell us they know where to target this legislation at, the centres that they repeatedly go to and they're not meeting standards. But there's also more work that the states need to do to build that workforce. And we've seen Queensland, South Australia and Victoria announce an extra investment in their regulators. That's a good thing. There's work that's got to be done right across the country. And it's not just this legislation, it's not just the work of regulators, it's the things we talked about a couple of weeks ago. It's about a register so that we know where workers are from centre to centre and from state to state. It's about CCTV and how that works. You know, if we're going to roll that out, we've got to make sure we do it in the right way so that the sort of predators we're all worried about in our centres can't use that sort of information for all the wrong reasons. And it's about the sort of training that we provide to the most important people who work in those centres. one of the things I'm very conscious of in this job is that with everything that's happened in the last couple of weeks, the people who work in our centres, the good, honest, hard-working people who love our kids, look after our kids, including mine in centres, feel tarnished, feel tarred by this. People have been spat on in the streets for wearing their uniform. They're the best asset we've got here to keep our kids safe. 99.9% of them are those people.
You're clearly worried about those people, aren't you?
I am. I am. They do some of the most important work in the world. When my wife fell pregnant for the second time, we showed an ultrasound to my little boy Jack and told him he was going to be a big brother. And we thought, you know, he'd be really excited. First thing he said was, "I can't wait to tell Kelly." Kelly is the woman that looked after him at childcare, and it told me that this is not an ordinary job. These are very special people, and they're as hurt and as angry as everybody else out there. And I've got to use this role and this responsibility and this opportunity to tell Australia how important they are as well. But we've got to equip them with the skills that they need to identify a predator lying in clear sight who might be grooming a child or grooming them. And that's what mandatory child safety training is all about.
Just come back to the way the system works, because you're bringing your personal experience to that. It's important. It's something that's clearly moved you because you've been very lucky to have excellent childcare staff.
Yes.
But do you think that they are also being let down by the standard system? It's been in place for a long time. Is it still adequate for what we need to address what is a crisis in the childcare system?
No. No, but
So do you need to... Well, I'm asking you about the system of standards itself. For example, as you know, the way things stand at the moment, a childcare centre cannot be failed for its performance. Do you need to have at least a standard of failure?
Well, there sort of is, but there's euphemisms about how you describe it.
Isn't it time we got rid of all of the euphemisms in this area?
The point is, and I think it's pretty bloody obvious, that the system has failed parents here, and that we've all got a responsibility to step up. That's the Commonwealth government, that's state governments, that's the people who run these centres as well. Part of this legislation is the power to cut off funding. Part of it is also the power to advise parents or to publish information to tell the mums and dads whose children are at these centres that unless the standards improve at that centre, we're going to cut off their funding. Not just them, but also to pass that same information on to the board members who run these companies and the stock exchange. You know, the big...
Do you think those big companies in particular, the private equity involved in childcare and some of the big companies with multiple centres, do you think these people have been indifferent to the suffering of children in those centres?
Money talks, and unfortunately some organisations have put profit ahead of the safety of our children. You know, I'm happy for that.
Any of those companies, those groups, still be operating in Australia?
If they don't meet the standards that we set as a nation that parents expect and that our kids deserve, no. If they meet those standards, then that's good. What this legislation's about is sending a very clear message. You know what the standards are. If you don't meet them, then there's no place for you in the childcare system.
I want to be very clear about the standards because I'm raising questions about the nature of the standards themselves. This whole system that you are creating depends on the standards themselves being strong and effective. Do those standards themselves, the way we rate childcare centres, do they need to be overhauled?
I think the standards are sound. I think the rating system is sound. I think there's more work that needs to be done by the states to make sure that we're rating centres properly. Now that doesn't mean, and more frequently, and it happens differently in different states. So that there's, please don't interpret this as me blaming the states. We've all got a responsibility here, whether it's Labor governments, Liberal governments, state or federal. Good work's been done, but not enough, not fast enough. There's more work that needs to be done if we're serious about making sure that we keep the kids that are walking through and sometimes being carried through the doors of our childcare centres safe.
Jason Clare, thank you very much for answering the questions and also sharing that story about yourself. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.